am Mary Collins. I'm the Executive Director of the Depression Bipolar Support Alliance, Greater Houston. It is my honor to introduce our speakers, Jessie and Glenn Close. Jessie and Glenn are sisters, and they have a personal story that may resonate with many of us here today. They know firsthand how mental disorders affect an entire family, but also how important it is to learn more about those disorders and how transformative it is to a family when you do. So please join me in giving a big Texas welcome to Jessie and Glenn Close. Wait till after. Okay. I don't know if any of you have seen me speak before, but I usually have my little 7-pound service dog. But she was attacked by a Saint Bernard, and she's okay, but she's on medical leave. And she'll come with me next time, but she was pretty beat up. Anyway. It's 1976, the New York Democratic Convention. Rosalind Carter doesn't remember this, but I do. I was 23 years old, a young assistant reporter, and was given an assignment to meet with Rosalind, Amy, and Lillian Carter on the curb. We were to ride around the park in a horse carriage while I interviewed them. But I drank so much tequila and snorted so much cocaine the night before that I couldn't get out of bed. I gave my amends to Mrs. Carter 4 years ago, but I destroyed my budding career in journalism as surely as if I left the first family standing on the curb. Did this slow down my use of alcohol and drugs? No. It would take me 25 more years to get sober, and it would be because I found myself faced with death, suicide, in 2001. It was the faces of my 3 children, Kaylin, Sander, and Maddie, that kept me from actually picking up the revolver that was there behind the truck door. It was then, New Year's 2001, that I knew I had to stop drinking or I would die and scar my children forever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It's now 1998. The town car was black. My sister Glenn found me at the Salt Lake airport, introduced me to the driver, long, curly, shiny hair, coiffed, his silent back in the driver's seat, us behind him. My craziness was to be certified or not. First stop, the Psychiatric Institute, then on to the Neurological Center. I sounded demented as the chauffeur pulled up under the portico at the Institute. I couldn't stop laughing. Who goes to a psychiatric institute in a town car driven by a chauffeur? Especially a chauffeur with long, curly, shiny hair. Glenn and I tried to make small talk. It wasn't a small talk moment. I was finally on my way to figure out how to stay alive, but I didn't find it promising to see a graveyard situated right next to the Psychiatric Institute. Still there. The psychiatrist sat very far away in his chair, me on the couch. He told me that if I had been able to do anything about the way I am, I would have. He told me I wasn't stupid. In fact, I was quite intelligent, which was typical of my disorder. Well, that's just great, I told him, but I had to call my neighbor the other day to take my shotgun away. I just know the feeling of warm blood would heal me from my pain. He stared at me for a long minute, then said, "Well, we can help you with medication. We'll start you on something to calm your mania, then introduced something to help your depression. But, he said, you may feel quite tired and heavy for a while. Is there someone who can help you for a few weeks? No, I have a young child and I live in the woods with her. Well, you'll manage. Brittle words. I'll write you a few prescriptions, and I'd advise you to find a psychiatrist up in Montana. I was 45 years old. My daughter, Maddie, was 7. I was convinced that the doctor was trying to poison me. But for Maddie, I began taking the prescribed medication. It is possible to love when suffering. After all, the neurologist had told me that his tests show that I had a very orderly brain and no tumor, which is what my family was afraid of, maybe. A tumor was a tangible reason, something that could be seen and possibly removed. Serious mental illness was yet part of the conversation. These 2 medications didn't cut it. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. I continued being manic and depressed and thought that the small relief I found was about as good as it was going to get. And being an alcoholic, I discovered early on that the medications allowed me to get drunk with fewer drinks. Always a plus for a drunk on a budget. And I still thought the doctor was trying to poison me. I called him and told him my fears of poison, and he told me he couldn't speak to me anymore unless I dropped this absurd idea. Small white in my palm, not something I want to swallow anymore. I take one more, thinking secretly, I'll simply not fill the next prescription. It's all poison anyway. Poison to keep me in order, to keep words out of my mouth and away from my fingertips, keep me working and paying the bills. I'll forget to take this one, and that doesn't match the others anyway, round and tasteless as it is, dissolving too quickly on my tongue. The others smooth, that stick easily to my lips when I bend my head into my hand to eat them. No one sees me not refill the bottle. No one sees me know I'll wean myself off them. All the chemicals that keep me doing as I should. But I did keep taking them for my 2 sons and my daughter, not me. The spring of 1998 also saw my eldest son, Kalen, spiral down into severe mental illness. I have seen up front and close how certain people in the medical health field support the stigma of mental illness. I had no idea what was going on with Kalen, so I took him to a counselor in our town of Bozeman, Montana. This counselor was not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and I'm afraid he only exacerbated the situation by telling me that Kalen needed to go on a personal discovery quest in the woods. How Montana of him. Thank God I didn't listen to the quest part, but I did listen to the difficult teenager part. Kalen is my eldest child, and I had absolutely no idea of what was going on with him. If only I'd known some of the warning signs, like suspicion of others, agitated behavior, withdrawal from social situations, deviation from normal routines and beliefs. All I knew was that Kalen wasn't Kalen anymore. And I never put 2 and 2 together as far as my own mental illness, that mental illness can and is passed from generation to generation. I don't think we are capable of seeing what is causing our children's pain. We don't want anything terrible to happen, so we put on blinders. I have a dear friend who finally threw some light on the symptoms Kalen was displaying. Pam Roberts had studied, among other things, psychology when in college. She came over one afternoon and observed Kalen, who was sitting on the couch, feet flat on the floor, elbows on knees, rocking slightly. She began speaking to him and then listened very carefully to what he was saying. She noticed that his pupils were huge. His words made no sense, even though they had a normal tone. He began telling her about the people who were spying on him, who pretended to walk innocently past the house. He told her about the antenna on the roof that was keeping track of him. He didn't say these things in front of me. Pam had asked me to leave the room. Then, when she called me back in, I could see that 18-year-old Kalen had been crying, and he revealed how frightened he was. Pam told me that she thought Kalen had schizophrenia. I did not absorb that fact, but because of Pam, we sought help from a psychiatrist as fast as we could. Kalen was put on Zyprexa. It didn't work. He asked to try naturopathic medications. Those didn't work either. It became evident in a short period of time that Kalen needed in-house care. After much searching, we settled on McLean Hospital outside of Boston. I took him, and as I was leaving him there, driving away in a cab, I couldn't stop sobbing, especially since he ran out of the building where he was staying and yelled his goodbyes, jumping and running next to the cab. I should have been dropping him off at college, anywhere but here. Grief, grief, grief. Grief wouldn't leave me for a very long time. Grief that exacerbates my own symptoms. I think I'm back in the world I'm supposed to be in, but I look at the clock on my stove and see it's 1:11 again, always 1:11 or 11:11 or 3:33 or 2:22, but mostly 1:11 or 11:11. What's going on? Why do I feel compelled to look at the clock and see these numbers? Kalen sees them too, and I remember when he first got sick, I wanted to believe he really was from another world, or another world was communicating with him, because that's what he said. Maybe it's true. I came to believe it wasn't true, maybe, but now it's happening to me with these numbers. There's an 1111 in the house. There's an 11 in the house number, along with a 3, which is usually in the numbers that are important to me. I live one house down from 1111, and I wonder if I should have bought that house instead of 1103. I saw 111 just now and yelled, put my head between my hands, and shook it in such a way that I could feel my hair on my fingers. If I can't come back this time, I at least want to know what's going on. The years between 2001 and 2004 saw me in many AA meetings. At first, I would leave Maddie with her little dog, Wing Ding, and an old family dog, Joey, who she was convinced would take care of her while I was at a meeting. Perhaps my judgment wasn't so great, but I did stick with the program. I've been clean and sober for 12 years and 9 months now, but even clean and sober, my episodes of depression and mania, accompanied by suicidal ideation, continued. Thanks to the generosity and concern of my family, I was properly diagnosed, which means the psychotic piece and my tendency to a mixed state and rapid cycling was finally addressed at McLean Hospital in 2004. When I sobered up in 2001, I didn't know just how big a favor I was doing for myself. My doctor at McLean told me he wouldn't have been able to diagnose me properly if I was still drinking and drugging. And he told me that alcoholism is considered a mental illness in and of itself. For those of us who are diagnosed later in life, grief happens when those windows in time from the past finally come into focus. When I look back, I am horrified by the memories of how I was. I can mourn now for the out-of-control me, the me who tried to kill myself at 16 and then again at 19, who destroyed everything good in my life with the highs and lows, the confusion, grief, and self-stigma I felt after a destructive manic episode that usually sent a husband or lover running, and the just got through it by the skin of my teeth after a depressive episode. I am now 60 and so very grateful to modern medications in my family, especially Glenn and our mother, who have kept me alive and thriving. Suicide is the result of untreated and undertreated serious mental illness. When untreated bipolar disorder was destroying my life, I felt that the only way to get better, the only way to be released from my pain, was to kill myself. I believed completely that my family would be better off. Suicide can make us, the living, very uncomfortable. But suicide is a way of dying that is the direct result of mental illness. Suicide is to mental illness what succumbing to a tumor is for cancer. A mixed state is most dangerous. A mixed state means that you're depressed and manic at the same time, the state that causes many suicides. Before I was properly diagnosed in 2004 and given the right medications, I left a flattened path of houses, cars, and husbands behind me. I honestly don't know how many cars I've traded in. Once I learned about balloon payments, I was all over it. Houses were more trouble. I'd get them ready, and inevitably, once they were cleaned up and ready for the marketplace, my mood would change and I'd want to stay. Unfortunately, the realtors wouldn't see it that way. I moved Maddie and me 12 times in 8 years, but husbands were the most trouble. I went through 5. It's easier to keep count of husbands. 3 told me, I just can't take this anymore. And 2 died many years after we divorced. James, a special services Vietnam vet, by suicide, and Brad, a major druggie, by heart attack. So now that I've passed the husband's quota, now that I don't get manic or drunk anymore is really the key, I'm thrilled to live with only dogs. Any